She thought she had finally found love again, a second chance, a fresh start. But as she stood at the altar in her white dress, smiling through tears of joy, her 7-year-old son raised his trembling hand and screamed the words that would shatter everything. "Stop the wedding!" What could a child possibly know that a room full of adults had missed? What truth was so dangerous it had to be shouted in front of everyone? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, trust, and the instincts we ignore. This story comes from a verified court case that made headlines across 3 states. I've changed the names to protect the people involved, but every detail you're about to hear actually happened. It's the story of Elizabeth, a 32-year-old single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. It's the story of Samuel, her son, who loved his mom more than anything in the world, and it's the story of Richard, the man who walked into their lives with flowers, promises, and a plan neither of them saw coming. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What did Samuel hear that morning? Why did Richard react the way he did? And how does a 7-year-old carry a secret so heavy it could destroy his mother's happiness? If you stay with me until the end, you'll understand why sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones we should fear. Elizabeth had been alone for 5 years. Her husband, a firefighter named Marcus, died in a warehouse blaze when Samuel was only 2 years old. She still kept his photo on the mantel. Some nights, Samuel would catch her staring at it, her fingers tracing the frame like she was trying to reach through the glass. She never complained. She worked the morning shift at a diner and the evening shift stocking shelves at a grocery store. Samuel learned early how to microwave his own dinner and finish his homework alone. But every night, no matter how tired she was, Elizabeth would tuck him in, kiss his forehead, and whisper the same words. "You and me, baby. Always." He believed her, and for a long time, it was enough. Then Richard appeared. It started small, a man in a tailored suit ordering coffee at the diner. He smiled at Elizabeth, left a generous tip, came back the next day, and the next. Within 2 weeks, he had asked her to dinner. Within 2 months, he was picking Samuel up from school in a black SUV that smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Richard seemed perfect. He owned a consulting firm. He had a house with a pool. He brought Samuel remote-controlled cars and video games Elizabeth could never afford. He made her laugh in a way she hadn't in years. Samuel watched it all happen. At first, he tried to like Richard. He really did. But something felt wrong. Richard's smile was too wide. His voice was too smooth. And when he hugged Elizabeth, Samuel noticed Richard's eyes would drift toward the window, like he was already thinking about something else. One evening, Samuel asked his mom a question that made her pause. "Do you think Dad would like him?" Elizabeth's face softened. She knelt down and took his hands. "I think your dad would want me to be happy again, don't you?" Samuel nodded, but deep down he wasn't sure. 6 months into the relationship, Richard proposed. It wasn't a surprise. He had been hinting at it for weeks, talking about their future, about how they'd be a real family soon. Elizabeth cried when he got down on one knee in their tiny living room. Samuel stood in the doorway, arms crossed, silent. "What do you think, champ?" Richard asked, flashing that perfect smile. "You ready to have a dad again?" Samuel didn't answer. That night, Elizabeth sat on the edge of his bed. "I know this is a lot," she said softly, "but Richard loves us. He wants to take care of us. Isn't that what we've been praying for?" Samuel wanted to believe her. He wanted to see what she saw. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The wedding was set for 3 months later, a small ceremony at a church across town. Elizabeth spent her savings on a simple white dress. She glowed every time she talked about it. But as the weeks passed, Samuel started noticing things. Small things, strange things. Like the way Richard would answer his phone and walk into another room, his voice dropping to a whisper. or the way he'd get irritated when Elizabeth asked him questions about money. One night, Samuel woke up to use the bathroom. The apartment was dark except for a sliver of light under the guest room door where Richard sometimes worked. Samuel heard voices. He crept closer. Richard was on the phone. His tone was sharp, impatient. "I told you, just wait. Once the wedding is done, the house becomes mine. The kid doesn't matter. His name won't be on anything." Samuel's heart stopped. He pressed his ear against the door. "She signed the papers already," Richard continued. "She thinks it's just a prenup. She has no idea what she actually agreed to. Once I'm legally her husband, I can transfer everything. If something happens to her, it all goes to me. Then we're free." A woman's voice laughed on the other end. "You're terrible." "I'm smart," Richard said. "There's a difference." Samuel backed away from the door, his hands shaking. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough. Richard didn't love his mom. Richard was using her. The next morning, Samuel tried to tell his mother. "Mom, I heard Richard on the phone last night. He said something bad. He said he's going to take the house." Elizabeth was making breakfast. She didn't even turn around. "Samuel, don't make up stories." "I'm not making it up. He said your name won't be on anything. He said—" "Enough." Her voice was firm, but not angry, just tired. "Richard has been nothing but good to us. I know change is hard, baby, but you have to trust me. Okay?" Samuel's throat tightened. He wanted to scream. He wanted to shake her, but he just nodded and went to his room. Over the next few weeks, Samuel tried again, and again, but every time he brought it up, Elizabeth would brush it off. She thought he was jealous. She thought he was scared of losing her. She didn't think he was telling the truth. So Samuel stopped talking and started searching. One Saturday afternoon, while Richard and Elizabeth were out shopping for flowers, Samuel snuck into the guest room. His hands were sweating. His heart pounded in his ears. He opened drawers, rifled through folders, pulled papers from under the desk. Then he found it. A thick manila envelope. Inside was a document. Legal terms he didn't fully understand. But at the top it said, "Transfer of property rights upon marriage." And at the bottom, in tiny print, "In the event of the decedent's death, all assets transfer solely to Richard Allen Brennan." Samuel's stomach twisted. His mom had signed it. She had no idea what it meant. He took a photo with the old tablet his mom had given him for schoolwork. Then he put everything back exactly how he found it. That night, Richard came to tuck him in. It was the first time he'd ever done that. "You're a smart kid, Samuel," Richard said, sitting on the edge of the bed. His voice was calm. Too calm. "But sometimes, smart kids get curious, and curiosity can be dangerous." Samuel's blood went cold. "I don't know what you mean." Richard smiled. "Sure you don't." He stood up and walked to the door. Then he paused. "Your mom's happy. Don't ruin that for her." The door closed. Samuel lay there in the dark, his whole body shaking. He knew then that Richard knew, and he knew he was running out of time. The morning of the wedding was bright and warm. Elizabeth woke up smiling. She had never looked more beautiful. Samuel watched her from the doorway as she zipped up her dress, humming softly to herself. "You look pretty, Mom." She turned and beamed. "Thank you, baby." She knelt down in front of him. "I know this has been hard for you, but today is the start of something good. I promise." Samuel wanted to believe her. He wanted this to be the happy ending she deserved, but he couldn't ignore what he knew. At the church, everything was perfect. White flowers lined the aisle. Soft music played. Elizabeth's friends filled the pews. Richard stood at the altar in a sharp black suit, his hands clasped in front of him. He looked calm, confident, like a man who had already won. Samuel sat in the front row, his stomach in knots. Just before the ceremony started, Samuel saw Richard step outside to take a call. Samuel followed. He hid behind a tall stone column and listened. "It's done," Richard said into the phone. After today, I'm in control. Once the marriage is official, I move the assets. Then I file for separation in 6 months, claim irreconcilable differences, and walk away with everything." The woman on the other end laughed. "And the kid?" "He's not my problem," Richard said coldly. "She'll be devastated, broke and alone, and I'll be long gone." Samuel's vision blurred with tears. He had heard enough. The ceremony began. Elizabeth walked down the aisle alone, glowing. Richard smiled at her like he meant it. The priest opened his book. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Samuel's hands gripped the edge of the pew. His heart hammered in his chest. The priest continued, "If anyone here knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace." Silence. Samuel stood up. His voice cracked, but it was loud. "Stop the wedding!" Every head in the room turned. Elizabeth's face went pale. Richard's jaw clenched. "Samuel, sit down," Elizabeth whispered, her voice shaking. "Mom, please. He's lying to you. He doesn't love you. He's only marrying you for the house." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Richard stepped forward, his face twisted in false concern. "Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. He's just scared. Kids do this sometimes." "I heard you," Samuel shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I heard you on the phone. You said once you marry her, the house becomes yours. You said it doesn't matter if something happens to her because you'll get everything." The room went dead silent. Elizabeth stared at Richard. "Is that true?" Richard's expression flickered, just for a second. Then he forced a laugh. "Of course not. He's a child. He misunderstood." "I have proof," Samuel said. He pulled out the tablet, showed the photo of the document. Elizabeth took it from him with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the page. Then she looked up at Richard. "What is this?" Richard's mask finally cracked. "It's just a legal formality. It says if I die, everything goes to you, not Samuel. You." Her voice broke. "You were planning this?" the crowd murmured. Someone pulled out a phone. Richard's face twisted with rage. "You have no idea what you just did, kid." He lunged toward Samuel, but before he could reach him, Richard stopped. His face went white. He clutched his chest, gasped, and collapsed. Chaos erupted. Someone called 911. Elizabeth dropped to her knees, sobbing. Not for Richard, but for the life she almost lost, for the son who saved her. Richard survived the heart attack, but his plan didn't. The document Samuel found was examined by a lawyer. It turned out Richard had forged parts of Elizabeth's signature and manipulated the terms of the agreement. He was arrested 2 days later on charges of fraud, attempted theft, and exploitation. The woman on the phone? She was his actual girlfriend. They had done this before, 3 times, to 3 different women. Elizabeth was supposed to be number 4. Samuel and his mother moved out of their apartment into a smaller place across town. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Elizabeth went back to her 2 jobs, but this time she smiled more, laughed easier, and every night she tucked Samuel in and whispered the same words, "You and me, baby, always." Samuel would smile, because now he knew it was true. Months later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from one of Richard's previous victims. She had seen the news story. She thanked Elizabeth for exposing him. She said she wished her own son had been as brave as Samuel. Elizabeth framed the letter, not because she was proud of what happened, but because she wanted Samuel to know that speaking the truth, even when it's terrifying, even when no one believes you, is the most powerful thing a person can do. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths, and sometimes love isn't about who makes you feel good. It's about who helps you see clearly. So let me ask you this. If you were in Elizabeth's shoes and your child told you something that shattered your entire world, would you listen? Or would you write it off as fear, as jealousy, as a child not understanding? And if you were Samuel, carrying a secret that could destroy your mother's happiness but also save her life, would you have the courage to speak? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Because every week we bring you real stories about real people who faced impossible choices and came out the other side. Sometimes broken, sometimes stronger, but always human. Thanks for watching. And remember, the truth doesn't need permission. It just needs a voice.